Daniel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Welcome everyone to another episode of Pride in the Living Room, Jewmos edition. Just a quick reminder, Pride in the Living Room was founded by the Israeli LGBT task force, Agudah, in memory of the 2009 Tel Aviv Gay Center shooting and in memory of the Jerusalem Pride Parade stabbing in 2015. And Agudah created this event to offer a platform for LGBT Jews from around the world to share their stories, to encourage community and empathy. And all of that said, it is my pleasure to welcome Daniel to the stage. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jared. So a little bit about my background. I'm from Toronto, Ontario, and I grew up in a pretty conservative Jewish affiliated family. And I always went to Jewish day schools, Jewish summer camp. It was a pretty strong Jewish community in Toronto. And I grew up in a little neighborhood called Thornhill, which was predominantly Jewish as well. I was definitely different as a kid, and I knew that I was different. I think that I had a hard time sort of fitting in. And when I started to get older, when I became a teenager, I realized that I was gay. And being Jewish and gay was a little bit in conflict, was a conflict, because it sort of put me in a position where I had to question my beliefs and try and get over the fact that I would be living a very different lifestyle than what I was expected to live. When I went to university, I was about 18 years old, and that's when I decided to come out to my family. And thankfully, my family was very supportive, and my family is very progressive, and my mom sort of already knew that I was gay. And, you know, my dad even said that it's not a problem and nobody's going to judge you, and nobody really cares at the end of the day. But I also was so worried about what they might think, because they had different beliefs from me ever since I was a kid. For example, to find a Jewish wife and to have Jewish children. And this is something that I was all of a sudden not able to do. So I always worried at the back of my head that my parents were upset that I wasn't going to be living the traditional lifestyle. However, over the years, I began to accept the fact that that wouldn't be my story, and that's okay. In that there are many other ways that I can start my own Jewish family, if it's so important to me, if it was so important to me, it would be something that I don't have to give up. So in a way, I was able to marry my Judaism and my gay identity together, because I didn't feel the need to pick one over the other. Being with a Jewish partner was always very important to me. I wanted to retain my Jewish customs and my Jewish identity by being with someone who is also Jewish. I did distance for a while from the community because I still found that I wasn't able to find my niche, in that I didn't really know other Jewish gay guys like myself. I felt kind of like the only one. It was very difficult for me to meet other people who were similar. So when I finished university and I started working, I was a little bit cut off from the community, and I didn't really feel connected to my Jewishness. That was until I started working at a job where I was surrounded by a lot of Jewish customers and a lot of Jewish clients, and I felt the need to connect back to the Jewish community. And I began as a gay man to explore ways that I could become more involved. Finally, I started attending Jewish queer events, and my first queer event actually that I went to was a Pride Shabbat dinner in Toronto downtown, and that's where I met my partner of 3 years. I went in by myself, not knowing that I was going to find somebody. I just not having any expectations. I went to this Pride Shabbat dinner just thinking that I would meet some friends, and I sat down at the table right next to my partner of 3 years, and that's where I met my partner. So ever since then, it's been so meaningful for me it's been so meaningful for me to create that same kind of situation for somebody else. And if I can give somebody else that opportunity, all my LGBT advocacy and programming work is worth it in the end, because if I can connect two people together that can possibly, share a lifetime together, then it's so worth it. So from that one single moment, I really began to get more involved in the Jewish community within the queer lens. So I finally got a job at the Jewish Community Center just a little bit north of Toronto, because for a while I wanted to work for a Jewish organization, and I was offered a job at the JCC. This JCC in particular is fairly new. It's only about 7 years old. And when I was working there, I noticed that their environment is still very conservative, very sterile, kind of old-fashioned. And I made the effort to introduce myself to the management team, to the directors, to let them, to get to know them, and to also explain that, we don't really do anything LGBT related. We're not really an inclusive space. Is there any way that, we can become more inclusive? And there was not opposition. It was more from a, how are we going to implement this, and how are we going to do this sort of thing? So that was a concern, but it was never a matter of we're against it. So from there, I began organizing programs, and the first program that I held at the JCC was almost a year ago now, and it was a call out for volunteers in the community for LGBTQ volunteers. And we had sort of an initial meet and greet event. And that event had a turnout of about 40 people, which we didn't expect for the area, especially being north of the city. We didn't expect that we'd have that kind of a turnout, but we ended up getting a huge mix of different people. And it was so amazing to see the mix of people and multi-generational crowd. We had a mother come with her daughter, and we had an Orthodox woman come with her daughter, and a father brought his little girl who's only 11 years old, and she says to me, I must be the first lesbian girl here. And from that moment, we could really see that there was definitely an LGBTQ and Jewish niche, and opening that door will allow so many people to come in, and especially into a place where they feel that they weren't necessarily welcome. So from that single event, I began planning more events at the Jewish Community Center. We had 2 big Shabbat dinners, and I began planning those dinners, and we've had featured speakers talking about their experiences. So sharing those experiences is so valuable to people in the community that aren't aware of LGBTQ issues. And that is, that makes it so meaningful. So that's a little bit about my personal background. I think we can leave it at that. Jared, I'm stuck.
I have a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Well, you've spoken a bit about your incredible advocacy work and the melding of your Jewish and your gay identities in such a way that you're able to pay it forward. I was wondering if we could take a few steps back to when you were having your own journey of self-discovery, maybe from a younger age. Would you like to, can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, I used to go to a program called Aisha Torah, and that was a weekly program for high school students to get a high school credit. And it was in the evenings, and it was with other kids, like from my classes, from school, same age. And I always really didn't feel like I fit in. And then we would talk about, Torah topics and things like that. And it was interesting, and I was involved, but I still, could definitely not be myself in that kind of environment. So it was sort of then when I realized that maybe there's something different about me. Even when I was in school, I mean, we just didn't know from, like, when I was in elementary school, I went to a Jewish day school, and it just was never talked about. Even then, when it was 90s, early 90s, late 90s, like, we didn't know about LGBTQ issues, and there was no such thing. So I think for me, I didn't even register that I was gay. It just was registering that I was different, but I didn't know that I was gay until I was maybe, 15, 16. And then when I came out, that's when I had that click of, I'm not going to live that Jewish life of marrying a Jewish woman and having children. It's not going to happen. So that's when it clicked. If that answers your question.
No, it does. Um, I wanted to ask as well, so you spoke a little bit about your journey of self-discovery, and I'm sure that there were emotions and and a mental state that you were living through at that time. Um, Today, as someone with all the wisdom and the advocacy of the work that you've done, what would you say to that younger self if you had that chance?
I love that question. I would say it doesn't matter. I would just tell myself, Daniel, it doesn't matter. This is who you are, and that's how God intended you to be.
Succinct, easy, I love it. Um, have you, when I speak to people about their LGBT Jewish journeys, and for myself, I'm included in this as well. Um, Often there are moments where there's challenges. There are people out there who have questions, and they there may be some opposition to the idea of merging the two identities together. So you were saying with the JCC, you didn't have overt opposition. There were a few questions. I was just wondering if there were any moments in your journey where either internally or externally um, you felt that there was some opposition, and how did you cope? How did you engage with that in your journey?
So in the past, if there was opposition, it bothered me a lot. So it got to me very personally. I did have a friend who was from a pretty modern Orthodox family, and I was very close with her, and her mother said something to me along the lines of, you should probably go talk to a rabbi about that. And my response to that was, I appreciate your concern, but thank you, I'll be fine. But that sort of thinking did bother me at the time, because it was kind of like criticism from the outside, not even coming from my own family, of people in my community, thinking that this is something that I need to talk to a rabbi about and get clarity, and be forgiven for. And that's not that's not okay to say. So it bothered me. But now, if I've witnessed opposition, it's been very subtle. I think my experience of opposition at the JCC has been slow. They've been slow to act, and implementation is slow because it's not prioritized. So that's my idea of opposite. That's what's happening, and that's the opposition that I'm getting. But it's not because of moral obligation, or I don't feel that it's coming from them being uncomfortable. There might be some that are uncomfortable with the idea, with having any sort of LGBTQ affiliation. But I think even those who are uncomfortable realize that we're at a point in time where we have to be, and especially an institution like a Jewish community center where it's open to the public and it's open to all affiliations, they're not in a position to really skip that anymore. So the only opposition that I'm getting is just, it's so hard, we don't even know how to go about it, so we don't. That's it.
It's really amazing to hear. I think, as you know, I live in Melbourne. I grew up in a smaller city called Perth, and hearing your story and your experiences, it shows how far a city can come, and something really amazing to strive for. I'm just interested. So you've mentioned that the JCC and your work within the JCC has led to these incredible events happening. From your own knowledge, is there anything else happening in Toronto in the LGBT Jewish space that you'd like to talk about?
So I see a lot of different circles popping up. The beautiful thing is that there's such diversity within the diversity of our LGBTQ community that what I'm seeing now is people beginning their own initiatives, and it's so great to see, but it would be also so great to get everybody together. So I see a lot of pockets, and I feel like it would be so great if everybody got together, but students want to be with students, and certain people want to be with other certain people, so that's fine, but that's what I'm noticing. And more people are getting involved, more people are coming out, and it's not as small of a community as it seemed at first. So it's been nice to see.
So ever since Corona started, I've been hopping onto Zoom events around the world. So I didn't have the greatest sleeping habits because I was hopping onto this Shabbat service here and this Pesach thing there back when it was still Pesach. And one of the events I found was, I think it was actually in Toronto. It was Judaica Zumba with Jewish music in the background. Was that? I feel like you maybe invited me to this event. Does that sound familiar?
So we had one in person, and then there was another one for Young Judea, and Young Judea has camps. So they have like Camp Shalom, and there's a new camp in Canada, in Northern Ontario. It's called Machane Lev, and this is the first gay camp ever, and no, not gay, LGBTQ camp. So they were supposed to be going into their third year, and because they couldn't open, they were having these events. So they had a Zumba with Israeli folk dance music. Yeah, I did invite you to that. I think that was fun.
I have been following their Facebook events, and I've been trying to hop on as much as I can.
Yeah, there's a lot going on sometimes. Like you'll see stuff popping up.
Yeah, it's really amazing for me to see. Yeah, I think once we're able to see each other face to face, a Jewish themed Zumba event is something I'd love to try and organize here.
That would be amazing.
See how we go. I wanted to ask as well, so you've mentioned that you have an active role in facilitating events. I'm not sure if you'd call yourself an activist, But I wanted to ask, has your work ever evolved into the political space? And if so, how?
So I wouldn't say that my work is that political, but it's interesting you say that, because I was kind of thinking how I could become more of an activist and get into that political mindset. But someone said to me that, let me tell you something, you know, I have news for you. Putting on these events and getting people out there, that's activism. And when I heard that, it lit me up. I guess I'm an activist, because I'm happy to get everybody together and make some noise, gain the attention. You know, we're bigger in numbers, and that's what I've always opened with at my speeches whenever I throw these events. And when people see that, wow, there's such a strong community and everyone's coming together and the numbers are growing, that's when we get the recognition. And I might not have the strongest activist voice, but when big events come together, that's pretty much activism. And I might not have the activist voice, but someone else might be able to fill that role better, you know?
Amazing. So these days, what does Judaism mean to you?
So the way that I connect with Judaism and what it means to me is to be a person that has Jewish values and that lives some sort of a resemblance of a Jewish life. So for me, Jewish doesn't have to be religious. It doesn't have to be Torah. It can be seeing my bubby or spending time with my family and my nephew and saying Yiddish words to the baby. Like, it doesn't have to be religious. It just has to be based on values. And that's what being Jewish means to me. It really isn't something that changes my queer identity, because I can be queer and I can still be all the things Jewish. And it's also very cultural. You know, it's bagels on a Saturday and Sunday and going out with family. Like, that's all it is to me. So I would like to say that it's more deep than that, but really that's how I connect to my Judaism.
It's really wonderful to hear. Yeah, everyone who I've spoken to has a different relationship with Judaism. Everybody goes on their own journey. With their, I think there's some roadworks in the background, if you can hear that. Everyone has their LGBT identity and the Jewish identity, and they all find a way to connect them. So it's really wonderful to hear your story. Do you have any anecdotes about? I mean, it seems to me that you're a proud gay man, and you're also a proud Jew. Do you have any thoughts on how you've had to connect those two together?
So that's kind of how I function. I think that there's never a reason to not be proud. And I think the most important thing is to own both. You own you for all that you are. And it doesn't matter if there's stigma behind it or if someone else thinks that it's not okay. This is your authentic self. And once you're true to your authentic self, you can embrace all parts of your identity. And there doesn't have to be a conflict even when people say that there is a conflict, there doesn't have to be. That's it.
It's so beautifully said. You know, people write books about this, and you're able to give a 5-second answer. Done. They must well in Canadian schools? Succinct, good.
I try to be.
I have two questions that we might leave us with, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
If there's anything else that you want to speak about, the floor is yours, obviously. Um, so I would like to ask you, what's next? What's next for you personally? What's next for all of the events that you plan in person or virtually? What's next for you?
So that's a really tough question too. I mean, especially now with COVID, there's been a lot of opportunity for me to reflect, and there's even been some time where I've kind of distanced myself and tried to clear my head so that once we do get back to normal, that I'm in that headspace to figure out what's next. What I think is next is I would like to continue putting on these events, but at the same time, I know that my work will not be as effective if everyone else is not on board. So what's next for me is to really make sure that I'm communicating to everybody and that everybody is on board with these initiatives. And it doesn't have to be like an extensive role. It can be something as simple as, yes, I know about it and I'm for it. That's about it, and that's what I plan to have more of going forward. Also, with future events, with future LGBTQ events, I really think that we're going to be having a lot more virtual opportunities for everybody to come together globally. And that's what I would love to see, is to see all these different communities and how people have built their LGBTQ communities around the world. And it's so amazing to see the diversity of people within a diverse culture already. So it's just great, and that's what I hope to see.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate what you're saying. In Melbourne, for example, we have lots of LGBTIQ plus Jews. We all have our queerness in common. We all have our Jewishness in common. But then maybe we're different ages. Maybe we have different interests. Maybe we have different beliefs. And so it's interesting when you are putting together these events, when you are creating community moments, and you have your queerness in common and your Jewishness in common. And it's really interesting and exciting to be able to bring people together despite their differences. We have such incredible richness in common, and it's really great to be able to embrace that.
It's so great. And that's what's great about being in person, is that I know that whenever I would throw something, everyone goes and sits at their own table. So you can have multiple tables of diverse groups. So you can still all be together, but you're all at your own tables.
There's one question I'd like to leave us on. So Pride in the Living Room is all about sharing stories. And, one of the best ways to understand someone is to really take the time to engage with that person, to listen to them, to have empathy for where they've come from and the journey that they've had. And there will be people who will listen to your story and they'll take something away, whether it's you being at peace with all of the different pieces that make up Daniel, whether it's your work creating events, whether it's you yourself being inspired by a Pride Shabbat and taking that moment not as a moment, but taking the moment as instruction for how you would carry the rest of your life, and wanting to give back to the next generation and the next group of people. The people who watch your story will take something away. They may be further back on their journeys. They may be struggling themselves. And so I just wanted to ask you, Daniel, as someone who's had the journey that you've had, do you have any words of wisdom? Is there anything that you've learnt that you would like to say to someone watching this video?
Find an ally. Like, always know that you are your biggest ally, but it's always so helpful, and it makes all the world when you have someone you know is on your side. So find someone that supports you. It can be a friend, a family member, a parent, and anybody who you know that can be on your side, and deepen your relationship with that person, because that person will have your back. But also, at the end of the day, know that you must always be your own ally.
Yeah, so beautifully said. Yeah. I can't follow it up with anything. I just want to say, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just want to thank you again, Daniel, for donating some of your time to being part of this project.
My pleasure.
Yeah, here's to telling our story in this moment and telling our story in future moments.
Hopefully together in person.
Yeah, very soon, I'm sure. We hope.
We hope.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you, Jared. See you soon.